And in my haste, I forgot to have you read the last two verses of that. So I'm just going to finish that out, if that's all right. And I'll start in verse 8. It says, "Woe to those who join house to house, who add field to field, until there's room for no one, and you are left to live alone in the midst of the land. The Lord of hosts has sworn in my hearing, surely many houses shall be desolate, large and beautiful houses without inhabitant. For 10 acres of vineyard shall yield but one bath, and a homer of seed shall yield a mere ephah." That's exactly what you want to hear when you come on Sunday morning, right? By the way, thank you for letting me come. This is such a wonderful, thoughtful place. Like, as a person who is very active, who is tuned towards like working, even something as simple as a part of the liturgy of a time of really thoughtful reflection, a meditation, and a time to just sit and listen, I never do that. And it is beautiful because it reminds me that I need to do that. Because a part of my work isn't just action, right? It's what Richard Rohr talks about. Action and contemplation are the two sides of a coin. And I need that. And it was so hard for me just to sit here while you were finishing out that song. And it was such a good practice for me to learn to do that. And that shapes me. That's what we do here. That's liturgy, right? That's beautiful. We learn to be who we are, who we hope to be, maybe. Or as your Wi-Fi password says, we learn to be God's dream for us, okay? But what I really want to highlight, that I was back there, I went to the bathroom, the Runaway Bunny, okay? I'm out there, and this is a book that I read to my kids every single night when they were little, right? We would have this stack of books, and we read the same ones because that's what they do. They're kids. They want to read the same books. And it would drive me crazy. Don't hear that, kids. But I would read The Runaway Bunny, and I would hope so much that if I read this book, okay, then eventually they would know that I love them like that. And then as I've got older, I've realized it's something different. It's just like liturgy and sitting here listening and taking time to pause. I didn't read that book so that they could hear the story and learn that I love them. Why did I read that book as a parent? I didn't know this at the time. It was shaping me to remind me that I need to love them like that, right? To always be chasing after them. But then as I've grown and worked on the land and been a part of this ecological movement and just literally spend all parts of my day thinking, how could and should this farm look? Okay? Or the wonderful farm that I'm blessed to have. I realized the Runaway Bunny gives me another, I used to be a teacher too, self to text or text to self connection, right? I feel like the earth is always calling us. We're running away from it. And we're saying, I want to do things my way. I want to go here and here and here, right? And what does the earth always do? It always calls us back. And it says, I'm here, I'm going where you are, and you're going to end up right back here, right? So learn from me and listen to me. And that's what the sermon a couple weeks ago was about, right? Consider the thistle. We talked about how ecology is always more complex than we think. There's a lot less black and white, and there's a lot more shades of gray in terms of what's right or wrong and how do we treat the earth, okay? But we also learned that it looks a lot like nature and that there's a lot of complexity. And like ecology is as simple as this. Get as many different plants growing in a spot that you can and help them to be useful and help them to thrive. And that's kind of what we talked about with the thistle. And the great thing is even something like the thistle, a weed, it can tell us what's going on in our soil. It can say you have compaction here or you don't have calcium here, right? And that was the point of a couple weeks ago. But as I told Michael asked if I would come preach. I'm like, hey, I can't do this in 1 week. And to be honest, I can't do this in 2. And I probably can't do this in 2 years, right? Like you guys could come to my farm once a month, every single week. We could talk forever about this because it would keep changing. And we'd be like the Runaway Bunny. We'd just keep going, right? And the earth would just keep on chasing us. But the other side of the story that I want to talk about is a lot less feel good. And that's ironic because a thistle doesn't feel good, right? Like who tells a feel good story about a thistle? But this is what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the economy of the food system that we run into. And again, it's complex. I've been trying to figure out how do I bring this to light? the first thing I want to do is just talk quickly about that picture that we see in Isaiah, right? So God plants this vineyard, and it's this beautiful picture. And the idea here is that you have this beautiful vineyard that it goes through, and it's producing something very good for the, and you drive by, if you're like me, you drive by a vineyard going down 70 or something like that, and you look, you see, oh, that's different. It's beautiful. It's not a cornfield. It's not a soy field. It's this beautiful vineyard going up this hill. And unfortunately, Israel had squandered it. It wasted it. And how did they do that? And the point of this is that Israel would be this little beacon. It'd be like, this is God's dream for the world, right? And so Israel would be this place, and they weren't. What they wanted is that everybody would taste and see, Psalm 34, right? Taste and see that the Lord is good when you walk into Israel. And they hadn't been. And primarily you see in this something that's going on right now. They were ruining it largely by ownership patterns. They were adding field to field and house to house. And that left them alone in the land. And how'd that work? Well, sometimes farmers are good and sometimes farmers aren't good, right? And sometimes you have droughts and sometimes you have grasshoppers and locusts that destroy things. So if you have a vineyard and you have a vineyard and you have a vineyard here, right? Let's say that you broke your leg one year. I'm sorry. I don't know why. Why did I pick on you? I don't know. So you broke your leg, and all of a sudden you couldn't harvest your vineyard. Well, what happens? Did you make any money? No, you didn't, because you couldn't harvest your field. Maybe you got family to come in, but so then you get behind. So now she's like, hey, it's fine. I'll buy this field from you. Okay? Now you're going to be the bad guy in this. Sorry. Must be this side. I don't know. The left side. So anyway, but now Denise over here, right? The next year, she has a dam break up here, and it wipes out her entire crop, right? And you come back in here, and what are you doing? You're like, hey, I'll buy your field, and I'll let you live there. You guys can still work there, right? But I'm going to pay you a very subsistence living, okay? What happens in this economy if everybody does this? You get really, really, really rich, and you get richer and richer and richer and richer, and you add field to field and house to house and land to land, right? What about you? Do you get to stay there? Yeah, but you're working on how much? Barely enough to get by, right? And you're paying taxes to her, and you're also paying taxes to the king, and you're like always basically in poverty. And actually, this might lead Denise actually to have to sell herself into slavery, right? So this is the system that's going on. And God is like, this is not good, okay? It's the opposite of God's dream, which is all throughout Isaiah and Micah and so many of the prophets. And it's this image of Israel that's quoted by George Washington in his retirement speech, that each person would sit under their own vine and their own fig tree. Is it bad that I know that from Hamilton? Is that... There you go, Ella. Start singing that one. But then it's not just that. He gives them a picture. He says, why does this matter? He says, one, you will be alone in the land. The beautiful picture of God, the beautiful God's dream of community of Israel isn't there anymore because you own it all, right? And also that, because when you do that, you don't take care of the land. You don't steward it as well as you should. You don't have as many eyes on that land, as many eyes per acre, as we'll talk about here in a little bit, right? So you don't have that. And so then, therefore, the land doesn't yield as much fruit. And this is the economic system of agriculture in Israel. What's ironic? That's exactly what's happening now. The first time I heard this was, I think Wendell Berry quoted this in one of his writings. The first time I heard this, I was like, oh my goodness. This is agriculture, okay? And I want to tell a story here. But first of all, can you go to the, I need to learn from the runaway bunny lady. So I want to show some pictures here, okay? I was trying to figure out, how do I make this real? Because I live this every single day. I know what this looks like, okay? So I was out tending my chestnut orchard yesterday. I was trying to mow lines so we can start to harvest chestnuts here very soon. And I was like, oh, this is it. Right over there, that beautiful field over there, that green field. You know what that's a field of? Soybeans, right? And do you know how that's, like, it looks beautiful, right? It's dark green. There's nothing sticking up. It's well manicured. Do you know how that happens? Lots of chemicals, right? And lots of really big equipment, like a sprayer is like $600,000, right? But man, it looks really nice. And you can go in, you can harvest that with $1 million combine, and you can keep that sprayed. And you know how much time that farmer has spent on that land? I figured it up this morning. It's like 3 minutes an acre. For a whole year, 3 minutes an acre, okay? So then this is me on the back of, like, there's so much stuff in this picture. Like, this is an old bush hog mower that we found just in a fence line somewhere. We fixed it up for my grandpa's, and that's what we're using right now. Now, go to the next picture. So this is our agriculture. Like, this is the picture from the bottom of my farm looking back up the hill, right? You'll notice, like, is this clean? No, not really. It's messy, and it's complex. And you know what? It takes a heck of a lot of time to do this. You'll notice in this pond over here, this is a pond grown up. This is a pond grown up with sandbar willows. And you know why I'm letting it grow up? Because this year I'm going to go in, I'm going to coppice those things, and I'm going to plant those all over my farm, and they'll just take off. Okay? So there's that. You also see these little trees in different states. Those are chestnut trees. Those are eventually going to be our replacement for corn. They're a perennial tree replacement for corn, right? We have some hazelnuts. If they'll ever produce hazelnuts, they'll be our perennial replacement for soybeans, that other really nice looking manicured field, right? So there's a lot of thought here, and it takes me a lot of time. We graze our sheep through this 5 or 6 times per year, and to do that, we set up fence. We spend time walking through this, and every time we go through this system, we spend a lot of time looking. Yesterday, as I mowed I'm like, oh, I need to fix this line. I need to see this. I need to take care of this little spot on this tree, right? So we get to spend a lot of time here for this. So if you'll go on to the next slide here, yes, what I want to do here today is I want to talk through a story of my family in terms of the economy. That was a really bad transition. Please forgive me for that. So I want to tell this story, but I want to offer you guys almost a confession of my family's sins and how we added field to field and house to house and land to land. But I also want to discuss how you were complicit in it, and then to offer a way forward from a lady named Ellen Davis, who writes about the Hebrew Bible and offers us a really nice concept called the hinterland. I'll try to be quick, okay? First of all, this is my grandpa, okay? My grandpa is is that your left? On the left, and that's my grandma, Hazel, okay? And when they moved here in like 1950, you see the orange dot? That's our farm right now, okay? That orange dot, that's what he had. He had about 200 acres. He was the biggest farmer in that area, okay? The top left was the Kings. Then underneath them, you have the Bodenstabs, each little white dot, right? Over here, you have the Steinmans, then you have the Schlieters, then you have what was their name? I can't remember their name. Then you have the Cressies, and then you have the Millers, and then you have I should know this because we used to own all these fields, okay? And you know what the name of all these fields were? There's people's names. My grandpa would be like, hey, we're going over to Steinman's, and we still do this, right? Okay, so at this point, this is what 1950s agriculture in Missouri looked like. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so here is kind of this allocation. This is 1930, so it really kind of switched in the 60s, so this is the best number I could get. You'll notice the orange over here, there's 43% of that is used for corn, okay, in 1930, and that corn didn't yield very much, but it was primarily used to feed animals. You notice the soybeans over here, they're very low, they're up top. The other big one is hay, so 27.3% of that is hay. And then you'll notice that you see oats, so 14% of Missouri's ag economy is oats. And then the other top of that is wheat, and you have a bunch of other stuff. You have some rice, you have some you have some rye, you have some corn, you have some barley. Sorry, we've been sanding drywall all week, and I still I wasn't wise enough to use a mask. So anyway, the cool thing about this system is it was very much cyclical. Okay, so these pigs over here. This wasn't from 1930. This was from like this week with our pigs. you'll notice that, so primarily grains in Missouri were used to feed pigs or cattle or chickens. And then very few of them, wheat and oats, they were used to make food, right, to make your staple crops. But the great thing about that, it was very cyclical. You might grow corn, and then you might have an oat crop after that the next year, and then you might throw wheat in, and you might throw in a clover, and that's going to turn into your hay ground, and your hay ground eventually is going to come back in, and it's going to be corn after you plow it up. It might be a 7 or an 8 or a 10-year rotation, primarily dedicated to feeding animals, okay? And a little bit of that was different. So another great Wendell Berry quote on this, I forget, it's in Jayber Crow, it's one of the old men. He says, all of my nutrients walk off this farm on 4 legs, okay? Because you go down trophic levels. If you feed it to an animal, it only uses about 10%, or you only remove about 10% of the nutrients, right? So that's primarily what it looked like. Very, very cyclical. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, now this is my grandpa a few years ago. Man, you bring me water again? No, that's good. Thank you. Ooh. I don't need them, but I might just take one just in case I want one. So then, this is my grandpa. We showed you this picture. These are my kids, so you can kind of see this is when the girls were young. And then this was a couple of years ago. This has actually changed. You'll notice the orange there is my grandpa's, right? And so now my grandpa owns the Steinmans, he owns the Schlieters. At the time, we farmed the Bodenstabs. And then you notice a couple other farms over here, right? Those are all big farmers who farm about 2,000 acres other places. Like the one over here in purple, they farm that. They live about 30 miles away and bring their stuff over here. The blue up there, they live in Higginsville, which is 20 miles away. And they farm 5,000 or 6,000 acres up there, right? And then the purple and the orange over here is another farmer who farms about 2,000 acres, okay? So what's happened in this time in between 1950, where there's all those different people, to now, is we've added field to field and house to house and land to land until we're alone in the land. But now, what about the fertility thing, right? Because we shouldn't, if the prophecy is true, we shouldn't be able to grow anything. Okay, we're not going in that circle again, right? Go to the next slide, please. This is such a fascinating one. How does this work? Fertilizer. In the 60s, there was something called the Green Revolution, and man, it sounds good, doesn't it? We want a green revolution. But the idea was we can use fertilizer and lots of technology to really increase yields. And you'll notice from 1950 all the way until 1982, and it just continues to go up, right? And what does it go up with? What does it correlate to? The use of synthetic fertilizer, okay? So go to the next slide. So in 1930s, we had this circular kind of rotation. Now, if you look over here, this is what it looks like now, okay? 44%, remember soybeans were like 1%? 44% of Missouri is in soybeans, okay? 24% is in corn, and 22% is in hay. And there's almost nothing else grown. We don't grow hardly any oats. We don't grow hardly any wheat anymore, just a little bit, okay? And those fields aren't cycles. You grow corn, and sometimes you flip it to soy, right? And hay fields are always hay fields. And what allows us to do that? Fertilizer. Because we can import our nutrients from where? Everywhere. Everywhere. Because it comes on boats. We can bring it from Florida. Phosphorus comes largely from Florida. Nitrogen is produced almost exclusively through, I call it the Haagen-Dazs. What is that? Hagen-Bosch, is that what that is? So we can produce that just basically from oil, right? So now we no longer have to cycle things. Now we do this. We just import our nutrients. Go ahead, go to the next one. And the beautiful thing about it is the ag industry still wants you to think that what does the farm look like? The farm looks like it does in the 50s, right? You look at that bacon thing at the store. What does the picture look like? Does it look like a confinement building? No, you see a farm of corn and soy and wheat and bread and all this other good stuff along with that pig, okay? Every time I drive by this in Kansas, I take a picture of this. Say one Kansas farmer feeds more than 155 people and you. And then they have milk and they have vegetables and they have all this. Is that stuff grown in Kansas? No, unless there's like a couple greenhouses in Johnson County or something like that, right? No, what they're talking about is calories. They grow enough calories per acre to feed 155 people, and that's it, okay? That is the way that we work. And what it looks like, go to the next one. What it looks like is a lot less circular and a lot more linear. I love this example. I'm in the animal production industry, right? So in Missouri is a big cow-calf producing state. And by the way, this isn't just for animals. This is for vegetables. This is for everything. You can go wherever you want here. So Missouri produces cows and calves, and it also grows a lot of corn and soy, okay? So what happens from there? Well, the cows, they're born, and they get backgrounded where? In Kansas. And what does it take to background corn, or to background cattle? Corn and soy. So cows, corn, and soy go to Kansas. But then they don't finish them there because the packaging plants are in Colorado, okay? So then what happens? They get shipped from Kansas to Colorado, but they don't grow corn and soy as much in Colorado, so what happens there? So like literally everything just goes different places, and it works in Missouri. Why? Because we can bring in nutrients. We can bring stuff in, right? So it's very much linear. Okay, go to the next one, please. And it looks a lot like this, okay? Instead of, you saw the pigs earlier, right? Instead of these pigs having a place where they can go out and they can graze, and there's trees growing, and there's crops growing in the ground, and there's a combine, what happens is we have these big feedlots, and they're very efficient, and they keep costs low, right? There's a case to be made for that. And it takes corn and soy and a little bit of hay to make all of this work. Okay, and that's what you're buying. Go to the next slide. What we've come to realize in our farming endeavor, like just getting to know how this works, if you're buying food, and we buy food at the grocery store, right? If we're buying food at the grocery store, it's that linear model. That's the only way that you can get food at the grocery store to look like that. Okay? The cost of that ground beef, what does that cost now? Is it $4? Is it at least, right? So the cost of that is $4. Is $8? Man, you must buy the good stuff. So we used to direct market beef and lamb, chicken, and we used to do that before. There's a different reason for that. Anyway, when we start looking at the real cost of that, we had to sell it for $10. Okay, so what's the difference? How come you can buy $4 beef at the grocery store or $6 beef, but the real cost of that's $10? And it's the same thing with vegetables. Why is that? I had a really fun conversation over beer one night. I have a buddy who's an economist in Washington, D.C., and we just did a bunch of back-of-the-napkin sketching. Do you know how many times that beef is subsidized by you guys? At least 50. Okay? At least 50 times that price is being brought down by subsidies paid for by your taxes. Okay? The oil industry is heavily subsidized. We just went through all the different steps of this, right? Oil industry. The corn industry is subsidized. The soybean industry is subsidized. All the way through. By the time you get all the way through, you have like cut close to half of that cost off just in subsidies. And it's like, I didn't know that. You might not know that. So you're paying the real cost of that somehow, right? Okay, but go to the next slide. But the funny thing about that, despite our subsidies, and despite the way that we keep pace of things, you know what's happening? This is real small. I wasn't expecting you to read this. I'm just letting you know that it's a real thing. I'm not just making it up, right? This is from the Business Journal. So this is from this last week. Farm bankruptcies surge as costs outpace crops. Okay? As we go through a cycle here in agriculture, as we go through a cycle, we're producing stuff for about the same in cost. And then we're bringing stuff in, and those prices are rising and rising and rising. And that leads to, actually, ironically, more and more farmers going bankrupt, which means that there are fewer and fewer farmers. And then what happens? You're swooping back in, right? And you're buying up his land and her land and all your other lands. The average, in our area, the rule of thumb is you need 1,000 acres to farm corn and soy. You need 1,000 acres for each person to farm corn and soy. And the interesting thing about this is the brag of big ag. This is a Facebook post I saw a couple years ago. I'll read it to you, okay? The tractor on the right replaced mules. Less than a century later, the machine on the left is replacing yesteryear's technology. In the time since this antique tractor came to the farm, American agriculture went from scarcity to surplus production. Yes. From 8.5 million farms to 2 million. So this is the brag of ag. The brag of ag is we want to add field to field and house to house and land to land. And that's the harsh reality of economics. And go to one more little thing here, one more bad thing, and then we'll talk about. And the really funny thing is all this is happening with the help of crop insurance. I was explaining this to some, was it you last week? So there's a system in which I, as a corn farmer and soy farmer, I learned this in the drought. As a corn and soy farmer, I was able to go in and guarantee a profit. I could go to my crop insurance salesman and I could say that I want $804 in revenue protection. They'd be like, okay, well, your cost is going to be $80 an acre, about 10% of that, right? Okay, and that's okay, and I can do that as a chestnut farmer too if I want to. But here's the cool thing about a corn and soy farmer. Do you know who pays for that? You do. Because I didn't pay $80 an acre. I paid $7. Okay? Between 80 and 90% of the cost of insurance to guarantee a profit to farmers is paid for by you. And what's the problem with that? Let's say that you're 70 years old and somebody says, hey, you ought to plant a cover crop and get into regenerative ag. Or you ought to add grazing. Or like my plea to everybody is for big farmers, say to take 1,000 acres and to take 30 acres of it and put it in chestnuts or some high value thing that your kid can come and do, right? But why would you do that if you're guaranteed a profit for almost no cost? And that's a big systems thing, right? Okay, but let's quit talking about that stuff. I want to quickly talk about a couple things. Go ahead, go to the next one, okay? A lady named Ellen Davis. She's a Duke Divinity professor. She talks about something called the hinterland. The hinterland, so like the agriculture model right now is linear. It goes here to here to here to here, and it ends up at your grocery store, right? She proposes something else based upon the life of Israel, and it's the idea of the hinterland, okay? Israel was centered around cities, a city of Jerusalem or a city of Bethlehem, right? And what was around the city? The hinterland, the place where they grew food. And she says they were locked together in this, they would protect each other. They would provide economic alternatives. They would provide like protection, defense, right? And this is how I think if food was going to change in our area, this is how I would do it. Okay? So here's a picture of Deuteronomy 28. If you will only obey the Lord your God, let's move to the next one. She says, blessed shall be you in the city, and blessed shall you be in the field. Blessed shall be the fruit of your womb, the fruit of your ground, and the fruit of your livestock, both the increase of your cattle and the issue of your flock. Blessed be your basket and your kneading bowl, and blessed shall you be when you go out and when you come in, and blessed shall be when you go out. The picture here is of us people of a city. They would live in the city. Some people would go work out in the fields. They would bring it back in. They would grind it. They would knead it. They would turn it into things. They would sell it. But it was all this interconnected mess of the city and the country going in and out. Okay, it's the concept of the hinterland. Go to the next one, please. This is Psalm 107. This is a picture of what God does with a desert. He turns rivers into desert, springs of water into thirsty ground, a fruitful land into a salty waste because of the wickedness of its inhabitants. But then he turns a desert into pools of water, a parched land into springs of water. And there he lets the hungry live, and they establish a town, desert to town, to live in. They sow fields around this town. They plant vineyards around this town, and they get this fruitful yield, right? By his blessing, they multiply greatly, and he does not let their cattle decrease. He says, take the city, go in and go out, form intimate relationships with those around you. And everybody does the work. So what could we learn from that? Now, I don't like the idea of telling people what to do, right? Because you guys know what to do. You're smart people. But if the narrative, we talked about the thistle last week or a couple weeks ago, if the narrative of the hinterland became a food narrative of this, then you'll figure so many things out. But here's a couple things to think about. Go to the next one. The first thing, everyone in the hinterland model, everyone works at food. Every single person. Okay? Wherever you live in the city or in the country, everyone needs to work at food. And that's really valuable, even if you fail at gardening. Like, you learn a lot from failing, from gardening. One of my favorite things, if I could say everybody should try one thing, I would say go to your yard and plant a permaculture guild. Okay? So a permaculture guild is wonderful. It starts with something that you want to grow. So this is called a fruit tree guild. Okay? You might start with a semi-dwarf apple tree. And then you plant a bunch of food stuff around it that all cover. You have some ground cover stuff like strawberries and some spring bulbs. You might have some wild ginger in there. You have some garlic. You might have some hazelnut bushes that kind of grow up in the middle section, and your tree pops out of that. But you can do really nice landscaping just with a permaculture guild. And what's funny is I walk up here, you know what I saw outside of your church? Kind of that. You guys have a pollinator habitat. And what's beautiful about it, somebody was watching this because I noticed there's a concrete path coming down, and there's a swale running down there. Somebody was watching and realized that every time it rains, the water runs right down that, and it pools right here, right? So we can direct that, put water-loving plants in here. Somebody put a lot of thought into that. And it's just the thought, that is the work of the hinterlands, okay? But instead of just with pollinators feeding the bees, we can feed ourselves, okay? That's one quick thought. Next quick thought. I would love to do this at some point, okay? So this is a picture of something called alley cropping, okay? These are like my chestnut trees. These are mature trees, and they're growing wheat in between here, okay? Like, one of the big dreams that Lauren and I keep talking about is the idea of a full diet CSA. If it looked a lot like this, where we have trees and we have crops and we have pigs and we have chickens and we're grazing in here and we have vegetables growing in different places, like, I would love to take that Kansas sign of we feed 155 people, and I would love to feed 155 people, like a real diet, okay? And that's possible if we see this as a hinterland, right? You're not going to grow grains in Kansas City. That's not. But you eat bread, right? You probably shouldn't try to grow lamb or beef or pigs in Kansas City. Your neighbors may not like that, okay? But people in the country can. And if you see it as one cohesive unit that looks out for the good of each other in this area, that's one way to do it. And especially if it involves trees, oh man. Okay, let's look at the next one. Here's another fun one. Okay, a lot of you probably have investments. We're working with people right now who are trying to develop an agricultural model in which you can invest and return between 8 and 15% on money in order to develop tree systems. Okay, that's another way to look out for the economic well-being of the country, right? So there's other options there. Go to the next one. And here's my favorite. Okay, when we were here, like when we were at a farmer's market, we realized the problem with the farmer's market. What's the problem with the farmer's market? It's hard. It's hard, right? It's hard to go to the farmer's market, and you got to buy your carrots, and you got to cut your carrots, and you got to skin your carrots, right? And you got to go all the way through, and you got to cook every single meal, and then you got to cook your beef or whatever you're doing there. It takes a lot, and it was great during COVID because we all had time, okay? But now, you guys are running to soccer. We're running to soccer games. Like, we're running everywhere. I would love to see a group of people figure out how to make eating local, healthy food very easy for families. And there are really good examples of people doing this. But what a blessing you'd be to a community if you could figure out how to take and process and make this convenient so that everybody can do that. Those are my thoughts on that. Go to the next one. I think that's it. Yeah. So transitions were great this week, right? But thank you so much. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. One of the things that I would really, as you guys are, thank you for coming up. Like I would love to figure out how to partner with some people, like in a city. I would love for you guys to come out, do meditations, help work on trees, but it's not just me, right? There's a bunch of people in this area doing really good work on good food that is very cyclical. Okay? And if you guys can find someone or some group of people to partner with, that would be a big blessing to this part of the world. Thank you.
Please rise.